Hello everybody, thank you for joining me today to have a look at my new film and allow me to talk about why and how I made it. So first of all, I'd like to give you a little bit of background. My name is Beth Cowley. I'm a PhD researcher here at the CFPR and I'm looking at the use of 3D printing and stop motion animation. However, that's not really what I'm talking about today. I'm an animator and model maker. I studied an MA here a few years ago at UE in animation, and from that I set up a collective called Weird Eye with two fellow animation graduates. So here you can see some of the work we have done. We have worked for clients on a mix of projects predominantly in 2D using a mix of After Effects and TV Paint, both softwares that are used predominantly in the animation industry. We initially set up to make short films after we graduated the MA. There is often a sharp decline in animators making personal work or short films after graduating due to the lack of funding and time. So we wanted to keep this creative endeavour going as well as fulfilling our own individual career aspirations. So we decided to make an anthology of films centered around the idea of bad luck. We started by looking at various resources for cultural taboos and superstitions and started brainstorming. Being a trio of women, we were instantly drawn to the ones about menstruation, of which there were dozens, and many were totally bizarre and contradictory. I decided I wanted to develop these into a narrative, because I couldn't help notice how often these superstitions were linked to things that went against standard health knowledge such as hygiene, and also how often they seemed tinged with negative, unclean, or dangerous connotations. After coming up with a loose narrative, I started to look for an artist to work with for the visual of the film. I wanted to find someone whose look was very different to my previous films and that of the Weird Eye Collective. So I contacted Carl James Mountford, who is predominantly a children's book illustrator. I'd been following Carl's work for a few years online, and so I contacted him, and to my surprise he got back in contact, asked a few questions about the project, and did a few initial pieces before we decided on the final version. So this was the original design he came up with. I'd sent him these images because I felt they most closely represented the look I wanted for the film, or the look I wanted for the central character, but all of these designs were already licensed for things, so he gave me a close version to these. So we had this at first, and then I wanted her to look a bit more casual and a little bit more human. So yeah. So I had been tinkering with her for about a year, which when condensed amounted to probably about a couple of hours a month, with meetings with the collective to flesh out ideas and talk about new superstitions we had found, as well as breaking down the character and figuring out how to animate her. Then I came across this call out from Calling the Shots, which was offering funding and training for short film production. So Calling the Shots is a production studio here in Bristol, but they were, amongst other things, involved with the new creative scheme that is funded by the Arts Council and BBC Arts. And really the only kind of parameters on the idea was that it had to be a fresh, innovative short centered around this idea of experiencing and living in modern Britain. So the applicants had to be between 16 and 30. The films couldn't be any longer than 5 minutes. They had to have relevance, talkability, timelessness, and originality. The budgets were up to $5,500, and as well as that, the development scheme was focused on training, providing a mentor, and post-production support. As part of this of the scheme, there was the potential for the BBC to use the outputs on one of their many channels. And last month, my film was used as part of a collection of new animated shorts on a Get Animated program on BBC4. So you can go and watch it now on iPlayer. here is a link. There will also be our hyperlinks link underneath this presentation. I'd suggest you go and watch it, just in case you haven't seen it already, just so that the rest of this presentation makes more sense. You can find it on iPlayer, on BBC4, Get Animated, and my film starts at about 41 minutes 10 into the program, so nearing the end. And as I said, I'd suggest you go watch it. There will also be a link at the end, but I think the rest of the film will probably the rest of this presentation will probably make more sense if you see the film. So, assuming you've done that, I'm gonna take you through the process a little, just so you can see how it was actually made. So as I said, I got these beautiful designs from Carl. Carl had never worked with, this is the first project Carl's worked with that is animated. So the way I sort of explained how we were going to be doing the animation was to think about paper cuts and think about paper dolls. So the way in which a character is sort of rigged in After Effects is similar to stop motion in the sense that you kind of create a puppet. So you have a character, and then you break it down into all her component parts, and then you digitally create pins that attach all these limbs together. So here's a little behind the scenes video that I made to show you this process. So we use this plugin for After Effects called Duic, which is a French plugin. It's also free, which is amazing. And basically the way it's created, this is a head rig. So the way that you use this plugin is you create all the different elements that you want to move in Photoshop on different layers. You bring them into After Effects. And then you take them and you put them in order and you create some keyframes to represent how you want the character to move. And so here, this is like a joystick for the head, one for the left pupil, one for the right pupil. Normally you would put the pupils together, but we had to put them on separate ones in this one because she has cat eyes, and so it looked weird if they were moving at the same time. Eyebrows, and then mouths. She doesn't talk in the film, so there was no need to use to do any lip sync, but she does go through a full range of emotions. So these mouths help with that. Her hair is both up and down during the film, so there was a plug for that. And blinks. So here you can see all the keyframes, and so a keyframe is basically the beginning and end of a movement, and the computer automates the movements in between. So it figures out how you're going to get from one frame to another. You can then go in and tweak all of those to make it more naturalistic or quirky, but here you can sort of see all the layers that go into making that work and how the coding allows for these things to work. So the green is like the handles of the puppet, and all the purple is all the different Photoshop files. The red is the coding, and the other data that goes on using the plugin underneath it all. And here you can see the final sequence in which the head rig is used. The head rig is used in quite a lot of the film, but it is then attached to a body. So here is a body rig. Similarly, you have all the different Photoshop layers that have the hand, the arm, the upper arm, the lower arm, the torso, and then these are all added once again using a Duic rig, this time for the body, not just for the head. And so you have essentially a skeleton. These green layers show you the skeleton. So each of the Photoshop layers is parented to one of these. And then these dark green buttons are these handles, so the foot and the hip and the head. The thing that makes Duic interesting and a great tool for animators is it not only creates these handles and points in which to manipulate the character, but they also create a kind of more organic movement. So if you move the hips, the whole leg moves as well. If you move the head, the neck moves, or vice versa, depending on what you want to happen. And when you move the character, she moves as if pulled through gravity, not just a flat image in a computer generated world. So here you can see all the movements happening, and then you'll see a clip from the film in which this is used. Here you go. So the film centers around these central core themes. So menstrual taboos, superstition, female empowerment and health, and witchcraft, occult, and folk horror. So during the film, I listened and read a lot of books about menstruation and witch traditions from pop culture, scientific, anthropological, and current and historical cultural positions. But as a fictitious narrative story, it also had to fit within certain narrative arcs to make it an engaging film to watch. Superstition and beliefs centered around menstruation, both the blood itself and the women, are prevalent throughout almost every cultural, gender, ethnicity on Earth. These vary in severity globally and often are linked to misconceived ideas around poison, sickness, and religious beliefs. Many of the more extreme examples include isolating women in menstrual huts, secluding them for religious activities, and insisting on either avoiding cleaning themselves or, on the flip side, ritualistic cleaning. So one of the earliest written references to menstruation outside of religious texts is that of Pliny the Elder. I'm just going to read this to you. So, contact with the menstrual blood turns new wine sour, crops touched by it become barren, grafts die, seeds in gardens are dried up, the fruit of trees falls off, the edge of steel and the gleam of ivory are dulled, hives of bees die, even bronze and iron are at once seized by rust, and a horrible smell fills the air. To taste it drives dogs mad and infects their bites with an incurable poison. So, in the film, there are multiple visual representations of various cultural taboos scattered throughout the film. So these include the idea that menstrual blood or a woman on her period will curdle milk or cream or dairy products or any kind of food really inherently, that they can tarnish mirrors, that crops and plants will die, that a menstruating woman shouldn't bathe or wash their hair, walking barefoot can bring on cramps, that you shouldn't have contact with others, that cradling a baby can cause them to get sick. If others see blood, they will become infertile, and that a menstruating woman's gaze can affect the weather. There are obviously lots more, but these are some of the ones that are represented in the film. There are a few others. There are almost certainly links to both patriarchal, political, and religious segregation of women, using menstruation as a reason to categorize women as weak, evil, or impure. However, there hasn't, at least in my reading so far, been one wholly satisfactory reason as to why this is. As with most things, I believe it stems from fear. Misunderstood things are often feared. Fear is a powerful thing that sways people of all backgrounds and gender. It has been suggested that menstruation, especially in societies both historic and current that rely heavily on hunting, use the menstrual cycle in conjunction with the lunar cycle to restrict sexual conquest during the hunting period, which allows women to influence better hunting and sharing in groups. This suggests that narratives around menstruation may have been perceived to give women power and give them control over their social group. So one of the things I wanted to achieve with this film was to not dwell on these superstitions as being wholly negative. I'm quite literal in my outlook in life, and I bring that into my filmmaking often. I decided to say, okay, so let's say all these things are true. Although probably quite annoying, it's all a matter of perspective. If I could kill plants, change the weather with glance, and make things rot or sour, then that would also be kind of cool. I would essentially have magic powers. I also like to think that there was some kind of recompense for the amount of pain and unpleasantness and cost being a menstruating woman brings, and if I could curse people and make things happen for better or worse, then you better believe I'd give it a go. The sight of this kind of blood, even in the developed and Western cultures, is seen as unpleasant or taboo. This has come under attack in recent years. as it has systematically throughout history with such things as period art, the free bleed movement, and multiple attempts to end period poverty in countries including our own. A general thrust towards normalizing this natural biological process is often the common pursuit. A good example of how insane this is that the first insanity project shown on TV with red blood rather than a blue fluid with no bearing on any organic human material was only shown in 2017, a mere 3 years ago. Unfortunately, all of these beliefs often stop women from living full and healthy lives. So the more literal take-home from the film, I hope, is that of empowerment, with all the amazing things a period represents, such as fertility, womanhood, and a healthy working body. Women are amazingly powerful things that can bear pain like no other, and are stronger for it. They embody a deep-rooted ancestral power that can be harnessed. In the film, blood is used to create a correlation between the pain and anxiety peaks of the character, the increased narrative tension, and the amount of blood seen on screen. This was also done to challenge the audience to accept the presence of the blood in its context in the daily routine of a woman and as well as using their inherent fear. The blood, along with the elements and tropes from folk, occult, and paranormal horror films such as Carrie, Rosemary's Baby, The Exorcist, Midsommar, and The Witch, also increase the sense of tension in the audience, albeit probably more for those who are big fans of horror films. These parallels in blood, horror, and fear of women brought me organically to think about witchcraft and witch culture. Enjoying somewhat of a revival in the last few years, witchcraft becomes a visual shorthand for empowerment. There are elements of divination and astral projection in the way she glimpses and is later enveloped by her ancestral female counterpart, which then affects her current life. There are nods to witch, occult, Wicca practices, dotted throughout the scenes, such as crystals, candles, books, symbols, drying herbs and flowers, as well as the witch's altar on her cupboard in her bedroom. There is also a recurring familiar that represents her nurturing or maternal side, and links her back to the current day. The levitation that happens throughout the film is symbolic of her inner power, first uncontrollable and threatening, then controlled and empowered. In some witching tradition, it is believed that women's power is stronger during her menstruation, and the blood released during this time has life-giving powers. Menstrual blood has been used in blood magic both innocently and with more dangerous connotations. Historically, it is seen in Egyptian, Nordic, and Roman manuscripts as a substance that can be utilized to give everlasting life, create love potions, and give physical control of over another to the maker. I tried to keep the character as neutral as possible. Often when a female is at the center of a film, especially one dealing with female health or narratives with horror overtones, she is either portrayed as hysterical or seen as hysterical in the eyes of the other characters. I wanted to present her as level-headed and calm. There was quite a lot of back and forth with the producer as to the thrust of the film and her intentions in the story. Something I felt quite strongly about was that I didn't want her to interact with others. I didn't want her to be trying to meet a deadline or being pressured by social cues. She is having a bad day and she is practicing self-care. The note on the fridge was a kind of narrative compromise, but it was something I felt she would feel required her presence and was something that linked to the other themes in the film. For example, she may not want to go, perhaps she doesn't want children herself, but she is a supporter of her friends who do. She is part of a community and not so solely isolated as she is in the day this film shows, but she is happy in her own company. This in turn also links to the preconceived notions of witches who, amongst other things, were healers, midwives, integral members of the community, and often outspoken. They were sometimes perceived as loners, foul-tempered, or overly strong-willed. They were succubi or crones, but as we commonly know now, or at least I hope we do, they were simply women that did not conform to the status quo of the day. Witchcraft and menstruation have common threads in their association with both good and bad aspects of nature, life, and women. Perception and attitude play a vital role in how they are treated. My hope is that my film will open further conversation thematically and filmically in these subjects. If you haven't already, You can watch the film on the iPlayer. It is also COVID dependent, going to be screened at some festivals. You can find out more about the film on the Weird Eye website, which I will also link at the bottom of this presentation. Thank you very much for joining me today. I hope it was interesting and enjoyable, and thank you.